Hello, 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 Monotype. This is Nammernan, and today we'll be doing a little smaller video. This is going to be a bit of a two-purpose video, I will say, but the main purpose behind today's video will be to discuss the recent viability ranking shifts. Now, it's not really that recent, it kind of happened almost last week from now, but I'm pretty sure these were posted either the day after I made my video or right before. I wasn't able to react to it in time to keep things simple. So, with that being said, I will still take a look at these changes and give some insight as to why these were possibly made, as well as giving my own thoughts on whether or not I agree with these rankings, which I agree with most of them, but we'll see which ones I do disagree with, and I'll state my reasons why. So, first, let's see that for Bug, we do see a rise for Slitherwing, and the reasoning given is that its access to Will-O-Wisp recovery and steel pressuring coverage allows it to be a good pivot on Bug. And if we do look at the usage rates, we do see Slitherwing on a good portion of teams with a pretty decent win rate. It's pretty much average win rate for Bug. But yes, Slitherwing was a relatively underrepresented Pokemon in the viability rankings, and considering its performance in MWP, which, by the way, this is the tournament with some of the highest class Monotype players, and they still brought Bug and brought this thing alongside it. I think, especially since with the very few amount of mons that Bug used in the tournament, it is definitely impressive that Slitherwing was able to get in there and also just do very well. So the rise to A definitely makes sense. I wouldn't say he's really a staple on the type, he's definitely just a very solid option. So let's move on to the next one, which is going to be Greninja's downgrade from S to A on Dark. And yeah, as someone who watched pretty much all the games of NWP, I can absolutely say that Greninja has fallen off. In the days of old, Greninja just used to be one of the most unstoppable Pokemon and one of the greatest Pokemon that Dark and Water, respectively, had access to. But in Gen 9, due to not only the Protean nerf, but also just changes to a lot of different Pokemon and the way that they interact with Greninja, it's just become a lot harder for Greninja to stand out, and its lackluster special attack is really beginning to show now, due to the fact that it can't use Protean to essentially have Omni-Stab, which those sets were typically the ones that did a lot of damage in the tournament scene, but now it's being forced into being a choice slot set, and there's, as evidently shown in MWP, there are just better options. As mentioned in the post, Darkrai is one of the better options, and also not mentioned here is Hoopa Unbound also sees usage over Greninja, just because it hits way harder than Greninja does. So if you want like a breaker, instead of using Choice Specs Greninja, who hits a little less hard on those walls that you want to capitalize on, you can use Hoopa instead, who still gets the jump on most walls. Doesn't hit all the targets Greninja has, obviously, but it definitely does hit walls significantly harder than Greninja does. And it's just a lot more valuable to Dark as such. So, yeah, Greninja's fall makes complete sense. And I think I did say with Boom during the mid-season overview that Greninja would probably fall down due to the fact that Darkrai has shown to be a very good replacement for it. So, yeah, very sad to see Greninja fall, but it is what it is. Next we have Sableye, going from A to B. Now, Sableye's fall is definitely understandable, because especially on Dark teams, and anyone who has used Dark can definitely say this, Sableye is nice to have against those fighting types that can really tear through your team. But aside from that, it's just essentially significantly worse than Mandibuzz to have. Because Mandibuzz just offers a lot more utility. It offers U-turn, it offers foul play, blanket checking, it also has access to Toxic, and you can use Defog on it, but most people don't use Defog these days. But yeah, Mandibuzz is just a significantly more useful Pokemon, and the big thing is that it can pivot. and also is a good defensive Pokemon. Sableye is not a good defensive Pokemon. Due to it's still incredibly frail. Even though it invests defensively, it's still a very frail Pokemon. And it can't really take those strong hits very well. It's really reliant on that Breaks to Recover to stay tanky, but because of the Recover nerf, and I know this has been a thing since the entire gen, but it's really showing here how much the Recover nerf is hurting its longevity. And it also is just finding it to be very difficult to stay in those fights, especially with a lot of hazard stack going on, which Mandibuzz can avoid the spike stacking due to it being a flying type. And Heavy Duty Boots invalidates its ability to get affected by Stealth Rock. If you do the same thing with Sableye, on the other hand, you either lose out on leftovers healing, which you definitely need because you're not very bulky, or you miss out on any other particular item that you would want to use. I'm not sure what else you would use, but essentially, Sableye just doesn't really utilize its defensive typing as well as it would like, due to its lackluster stats. So, yeah, it makes sense that this does fall. And, yeah, the Fighting MU is one of the big parts of why Sableye was used. As a fighting user, it was really annoying to see that mod. But also as a fighting user, I was also able to overpower that mod pretty easily with just decent play or with certain sets. Like, for example, Emboar, when I did use that mod a lot, that mod really brutally beat Sableye, so there are ways to just beat it outright, and yeah, it was just better for Dark teams to invest in something else that would help. Huba Unbound has shown to be a good option, but it's pretty slow. But yeah, with the right team supporting the right play, you can definitely play around the fighting matchup a lot easier, and fighting in general has fallen in viability as of late, so yeah, that's not helping Sableye's case either. So with that, I will definitely say that is all I have to say about that mon. Next we have Como rising from C to B. Now, they have a short description here. They're just saying that it's a very good steel killer. Now, I can't say a ton about that in MWP, because we did see it in MWP. We did see it a couple of times. 26% usage, not a ton of times, but when it has shown up, it has done extremely well. And yes, it is definitely one of the best steel killing mons on Dragon. And it's one of the reasons why I used to have a really good Dragon team. I think the Dragon team that got me to top 100 in the Monotype ladder. Yeah, that Dragon team that I used to get to top 100 actually had Como on it, and it was really good on that team. But I ran it as physical instead of special, but the same thing still applies, the same concept kind of still applies. You just have a ton of steel breaking power, and the fighting typing boosting your fighting stat just helps a ton as well. Because even though you do have steel breaking power with Garchomp as well, the issue is that the instant steel runs to either Skarmory or Corviknight, suddenly Garchomp is at the mercy of either Fire Blast hitting, or you essentially just have to switch out, and it just feels horrible as the Garchomp user. But Como has fire coverage that can hit both of those guys pretty decently hard, and on top of that, it can boost and hit them on the special side a lot harder. Which, for both of them, it's a bit harder to take those special hits. Because most of the time, I believe Skarmory is running physical, and sometimes Corviknight does run special, but it does tend to run physical defense as well. But yeah, Como basically breaks that core significantly easier. And it also helps a ton against Dark as well, because Vacuum Wave is just really good at blanket checking stuff like Meowscarada and Greninja. Darkrai, after some chip, it can also do pretty well against. But yeah, it's a very strong anti-meta pick. I think B is definitely the right place to put it, because C is honestly not a horrible spot to put it, but B is definitely justified, because it is a very strong anti-meta pick, and I do think that the value it can bring to a Dragon team is very, very good. So, very hard to agree with that. Next one we have, though, is a fall for Walking Wake. And it is going from B to C. and the notes mention that it overlaps awkwardly with Latios, and it's still okay considering it doesn't fear Ice Shard. Yes, so they say that it does fall in line with contesting Latios on Dragon teams, which I definitely kind of agree with that. It definitely does find itself doing kind of the same thing as Latios. It was basically a slightly slower, different flavor of Latios, but it also just, didn't have the benefit of Levitate, allowing you to hover over those rocks, or not rocks, the spikes, which are everywhere in this tier, especially with Hisui and Samurott doing everything. But yeah. Walking Wake on Dragon specifically, especially because its cousin Raging Bolt has been doing extremely well on the type, and has had a very strong showing in MWP. It's just very hard to justify using this mon over Latios, because Latios' breaking power is better, and it also just has a better speed tier as well, and it also happens to be outsped by Latios. So that does not help its case either. And yeah, pair all these things together and you just have a mon that's that just finds itself not doing what it wants to do. Now, I don't think it truly belongs in C tier, and I wish I could go back to the regular rankings, but I think the mons in C tier on Dragon, I feel like Walking Wake doesn't truly fit in with those Pokemon, because I would say it's still roughly in the same tier as Como. There's still uses for it, like hard winning the fire matchup so that there's absolutely no chance that the fire user can win it. There's also the fact that it's a water type, so it allows it to take those ice hits from the rare few Pokemon that have that powerful ice coverage. It can take those ice hits for Dragon pretty decently. Even though you do have to double Steel Core, having an offensive Pokemon do that for you as well is definitely huge, without having to run Choice Scarf or Caledon. But yeah, I mean, I don't hugely agree. I'm not against it, but I definitely don't hugely agree with dropping it down to C. But with that being said, the reasoning makes enough sense, so I'm kind of fine with it. But I definitely think the fall off is noticeable for sure for Walking Wake on Dragon. So now let's move on to Electric. Now, Electric showing in MWP was unfortunate, to say the least. I have a video on this very channel showing what happened to Electric in this tournament, and yeah, it's been rough for Electric, but it does seem that with its few appearances, there have been changes in how Electric's meta has been evolving, and one of them is increasing Reggie-Alecki's viability and decreasing Sandy Shock's viability. Now, I'm going to cover these two at the same time because it just fits under the entire umbrella of Electric as a whole, but yeah, Electric is typically ran as screens offense nowadays. It used to be you could do either screens or you could do either Stealth Rock or Sandy Shocks, but Sandy Shocks has just been very, very underwhelming, especially with the rise of Gliscor happening. And if one of your Pokemon that is supposed to be your hazard setter as well cannot do anything to Gliscor, especially if you're up against a flying team as Electric, that is incredibly bad. So yeah, Electric just typically tends to opt for either no rocks or they just use screens and just try to threaten with their aggressive offense, because that is typically the best way to run Electric. You can use Oricorio if you want, you can use Raging Bolt with specs, you can do a lot of other things with Electric, especially with terrain and screens. And that is why Reggie-Alecki is actually good. I actually think Reggie-Alecki should have been A in the first place, because I think the amount of Reggie-Alecki is just very omnipresent on Electric teams in general. I think even before this rise, it was just, or before MWP, it was just a very good mon, and I kind of think it didn't belong in B for a while, because it definitely was showing up a lot more than a B mon is supposed to on Electric teams, especially on the ladder, and against good Electric players as well. I'm pretty sure most of them did use Reggie-Alecki back then as well, during my climb to top 100. And I think that it's very weird that it was B for as long as it was. especially since I think at the time people were still saying that Sandy Shocks was not that great, even though it was an A rank Mon. So I don't know. Maybe it's because people weren't really paying that much attention to Electric because there was a big team tour, or maybe it's because WinCon brought more attention to Electric because of his recent discovery of Oricorio and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I definitely think that Regieleki should have been a while ago, but hey, better late than never. And yeah, Sandy Shocks' fall definitely makes sense. I think B might be a bit too high for it, but I'll take a look at Sandy Shocks again and see if maybe there's something we can do with it. But yeah, I think it's because it's a photosynthesis mod, or not photosynthesis. Actually, yeah, it is a photosynthesis mod. It's a photosynthesis mod, but yeah, it's quite rough. But yeah, it being a photosynthesis mod does still give it a decent matchup against fire, so it's not entirely useless, but it definitely is not as useful as you would like it to be. Next up, we have Okidogi and its fall. Finally, I've been begging for this mon to fall for a while, because I genuinely do not think that this thing was ever that great. I just think that there are a ton of better options that you could have used for, instead of Okidogi, because first of all, overlapping double Psychic Weakness is terrible. And as you can see from the core that I suggested in here, you have AV Doge, Scrafty, and SD Hands, but that's an incredibly slow team, and you're basically putting a lot more pressure on your Sneasler to do all the revenge killing, which can be hard with the amount of hazard stack that goes on. And that puts a lot of pressure on your Great Tusk, which simultaneously puts pressure on your other mons as well, and it's just annoying. This mon is just really obnoxious to use on fighting, and it is a decent bulk up mon, and it is a good AV user, but I think if you're going to use an AV user, you might as well just use Gallade, and if you need another AV user to go with Gallade, you can just do Gallade and Scrafty together, because there's absolutely no reason to try and use this, in my opinion anyway. There's no reason to try and use this outside of like a few niche matchups like Fairy, because it does do pretty decently well against Fairy, but you have Sneasler as well, so no, you don't really need to double down that much. You can just try and play around Fairy a bit better. And especially with the new Band or Shifu set, the Fairy matchup can become a lot easier. Even though the double water core is common, Shifu is still just that strong that even a double water core can find itself not doing too hot in those situations. But yeah, I never liked this one, and seeing it fall puts a smile on my face. But yeah, I definitely hard agree with this, for sure. Now if only we could get Embor up to C tier, that would be great. But yeah, in all seriousness, Okidogi definitely does deserve a fall. We saw it during MWP, during Fighting's Decline. Let me see if I can find it. But yeah, during Fighting's Decline, Okidogi not even brought a single time. And this used to be a B rank mod. We see Scrafty, we see Gallade as well. Like, the fact that we saw Scrafty more often than that mod. We also saw Keldeo as well, and Komo, and we still didn't see Okidogi. That should tell you all you need to know. And Fighting was still losing, even without using that arguably dubiously viable mod. But yeah, let's move on to Fire. So yes, same 6 mods, and the meme is now real. Yeah. So now these 3 are all S tier: Cinderace, Volcarona, and Ninetales. The only Pokemon that you see on the same 6 teams, or not the same 6 teams, but the same 6 mods that you won't see are, I think it's Ceruledge. I know it's Ceruledge, but I forget who the other mod is besides Torkoal. But yeah, there's another one that isn't up there. But yeah. Currently, if my memory serves correctly, it's Ogerpon, Heatran at the top, and then now it's also joined by Cinderace, Volcarona, and Ninetales. And yes, Cerulege is definitely on the A tier, which if you had to drop anyone on the big six, it's definitely Cerulege. But who you're dropping Cerulege for, you better have a good reason and a good explanation, because Cerulege is extremely good, and it just fits way too well onto the core as well. I'm not going to say Cerulege is definitely S-rank mon. I think it not being S-rank definitely makes sense, because it is the mon you drop to experiment with other different Pokemon, and it's not like you won't have a physical attacker either. You don't super need a ghost type on fire. It's very nice to have, but you don't super need it, I would say. Because you already have hazard switching with Cinderace. So you have like pseudo hazard control, so you don't really need a spin blocker that much. So if someone stacks hazards on your side of the field, if you manage to maneuver your Cinderace properly, you can actually get the hazards on their side of the field, and it really makes it hard for the hazard user to play around sometimes, because now they have to essentially remove their own hazards while also dealing with Fire's offensive onslaught. So yeah, you could definitely drop Cerulege, and dropping Cerulege could actually help you a lot, because Cerulege is very reliant on Focus Sash, and sometimes, and any Fire user can say this, sometimes you just can't keep its Sash intact. So yeah, dropping Cerulege definitely makes sense, but who you're dropping it for, it really depends on the matchup. There's a ton of different things you could drop Cerulege for, but what that will be, we'll see in time in the next big Monotype tournament. But yeah, next up we have Flying. So Flying, hold on, give me a quick moment. Sorry about that, had to take care of something, but we are still talking about Flying. So Tornadus Therian is dropping from S to A, and yes, we did see during the tail end of the tournament a lot of non-Tornadus teams, and the rise of the triple Cantonian Bird and Dragonite cores. But yeah, that mon has definitely fallen in usage. I'm not sure if I agree with it being dropped from S though. I think it is still a very solid mon all around, but maybe that's what the A rank is for. It's kind of a problem with Flying, because some Pokemon just fit on every single type kind of team. Some Pokemon on Flying just fit on every single team composition, and then some don't. But Flying has so many mons, and it's really hard to like find those mons that are just that good. I would definitely still say Corviknight is one of those mons that are just really good on the type, and I think Corviknight is still S on this type, so yeah. But yeah, not much to say about Tornadus. It's kind of just a noticeable fall in usage. I'm not sure if I super agree with it dropping from S, but I can see the reasoning for it for sure. On the other hand, we have Articuno, and at first I was against this nomination, like very against this nomination, because I believe that Articuno is a really, really powerful Pokemon on Flying. But then, after doing some reviewing of MWP games and seeing some of the Flying games, I realized that, hey wait, this thing actually did get like noticeably abused a lot in this tournament. And it's more than just the threats like Raging Bolt, Specs Marine, and Okeron W that the description lists. It's just physical threats in general, as well as Power Gem usage on a lot of things, because Power Gem usage on stuff like Fluttermane, for example, it's there to counter Volcarona, who has been doing a number on the tier. But Articuno is actually getting caught in the crossfire, because it's also quad weak to Power Gem. And those and other types of rock coverage that are being used to check Volcarona are also silently also checking Articuno as well. And that's really bad for Articuno and Articuno teams, because Articuno is a very central mon on the teams that it's on. It's a very powerful core Pokemon on those teams, because it's a very good special wall that can mitigate some of Flying's biggest weaknesses, namely Ice. And for it to be in constant danger of a random rock move on a Pokemon, and it doesn't matter what kind of Pokemon, it can be a special attacker or a physical attacker, it doesn't matter. The fact that it's constantly fearing those rocks, even with heavy duty boots basically increasing its bulk in the face of hazards, it's still really brutal for it to deal with, and I think because of those metagame shifts, it going to B rank does make sense. I still really think it deserves to be A rank, but the B nomination does make a lot of sense if you put all of that into account, so I'm not super against this anymore. But yeah, it is unfortunate, but Articuno will fall. Alternatively, in happier news, we see the rise of Galarian Moltres, which I think is very good, because Galarian Moltres is actually a kind of slept-on mon. Even though we did see it a couple of times in MWP, this mon is actually really, really solid. And it's been getting looked at in, I believe, National Decks and Gen 8, actually, are kind of looking at this mon because people are realizing that it's actually really powerful in those tiers. And I definitely think that it is unexpectedly very powerful. It's a very strong, not even just anti-meta, it's just a generally strong win condition and pick, because it's just a mon you don't really prep for that much on flying. Because when you're prepping for flying, you're expecting to deal with bulky cores, not really super strong attackers. You're trying to get rid of those very strong bulky cores and break through those, and then you can deal with their offensive Pokemon later. And their offensive Pokemon typically aren't that scary. It's like, at worst, a Dragonite, or you have an offensive Tornadus set. Nasty Blood Tornadus, for example. Or an Amorous, that as well. But typically those ones are a lot easier to check. Moltres, however, can completely run away with the game. Especially if given the right team support. After an Agility or a Nasty Plot, if you're a fat team and it gets a good Nasty Plot off, you are in incredible danger, because this mon can absolutely wreck your entire team, especially if it gets a few good flinches with either Air Slash or Fiery Wrath. Now, I know some people use Hurricane, or most people use Hurricane over Air Slash, but some people still do use Air Slash because hitting raw Hurricanes can be tough sometimes. But regardless, it's still doing a lot of damage to your team after a good boost. And if it's against a more offensive team as well, that even though it's not the fastest thing in the world, even after an agility, it's still fast enough to be a big enough threat to those frailer offensive teams. Especially if it lives a hit with weakness policy as well. Although I do notice that most of the ones that were used in MWP were boots, I believe. But yeah, it was mainly used for its defensive qualities against Ghost and Dark as well. But I will say that this mon is just generally very solid. And like I said, it was kind of slept on. I wouldn't say it always deserved to be B rank, but after its MWP performance, I think it's hard to argue against it rising to B, because it has shown that it's incredibly good at what it can do. And it being B rank makes a lot of sense. It's now in the same break as Articuno, funnily enough. Alright, now Ghost. So this is a major nomination that I somewhat disagree with. And I've talked to a couple of Monotype players about this nomination and about this metagame shift. And it's been explained to me quite a few times that why Pekarunt is just able to do a little bit of Goldingo's old job better, but I still kind of don't agree with it. And the main reason is, I've said this before when I was talking about how Steel did in MWP. Goldingo is just a mon that can do a lot of things. It's not just... I don't know. It's not just the fact that it can block moves. It doesn't just have to be a defensive mon. It doesn't just have to be a defensive or offensive mon. It can just do a lot of things at once, and it can fit whatever role that Ghost needs it to. Now, on Ghost specifically, I will say it's a little bit... It doesn't have as much leeway as it does on Steel, because Steel allows it to do kind of whatever it wants, but Ghost kind of forces it to lean a little more in the offensive direction, instead of being able to be a really strong utility mon. And that's just due to the nature of Ghost. But it does still find itself being useful with utility, but it's a lot less effective at utilizing, or its teammates aren't as good at utilizing its utility, which is very unfortunate. But yeah, Yeah, it's just very, very difficult for me to find for me to agree with this nomination. I know that Hecarim teams have been popping up a lot recently. I've seen and I've seen that it can do extremely well as well. I do think Hecarim is very strong on Ghost right now, and I think it's been seen to be a lot better than people expect. Which I think we went through this song and dance like not too long ago. I think like maybe 6 months ago we realized that Hecarim was good, and I guess people are realizing Hecarim is good again. I don't know, but yeah, I still think Goldingo is a mod that Ghost really, really wants because it's a Steel Ghost mod, which is a notoriously great combination, and it's still a very solid Swiss Army knife of things it can do. I don't know, maybe it's just because of the direction Ghost has been heading, especially with the screens teams being popular now, and the new rise in Hecarim. Maybe people just think Goldingo isn't as good as it used to be. Maybe we'll find, maybe someone will make a new Goldingo set that'll prove everyone wrong. I don't know, but yeah. But yeah, on the other hand, this rise of Hisuian Zoroark is not really that surprising. We didn't really see a lot of Hisuian Zoroark in MWP, especially on Ghost. Hisuian Zoroark only showed up like 4 times, which is a 30% usage in total for the amount of times Ghost was used. It wasn't that much. It got used more than Mimikyu, and I do remember, I think it used both physical and special sets, if I'm not mistaken, but there's also just times where it just got OHKO'd and did nothing, so it's hard to know for sure. Yeah. But yeah, typically choice band sets are definitely what I have been seeing on Lighter a lot, and also just sash sets, but sash sets have been a thing forever because people love that item. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I'm not against this change. I always felt like Hisuian Zoroark was able to was good on both of the types it's on, because on one hand you have normal, who likes spin blocker, and sometimes you can just pose as a spin blocker with good play. But with Ghost, you can it isn't really as effective since all of Ghost is spin blockers, but playing around opposing Ghost types, trying to use Shadow Ball or the like, are gonna have a harder time dealing with normal, or its normal typing. And you can get a surprise on maybe a Flutter Mane check, like maybe you get a Cerulege lacking, trying to use Poltergeist or Shadow Snake on you, and you instead switch into your quote-unquote other Ghost type, but it's actually Hisuian Zoroark. Yeah, it can be very, very annoying. I think its talents are better used on Ghost than it is on normal, but yeah, I do think that Hisuian Zoroark is pretty decent. A rank may be a bit much, but I'm not against it, so we'll just leave it there. Next up we have Amoonguss dropping on grass. So this actually makes a lot of sense. Now there's no notes left here, and I don't really know for sure why there are no notes left for Amoonguss's drop in grass, but I can say from experience both using and playing against grass, that mod is not nearly as good as advertised, because the thing is, Amoonguss works really well on bouncy types, and grass can't really do that effectively. And it's because it lacks a good defensive core. And if you don't have a good defensive core, it's hard for your defensive Pokemon to really shine. So because of that, Amoonguss is going to fall, and that makes complete sense to me. One of Grass's biggest weaknesses right now is that it gets bowled over by any sort of ice coverage, or it just gets bowled over by fire completely. But yeah, Amoonguss doesn't really help a ton with the things that Grass needs. And because of that, it's not finding itself completely necessary on every single grass team. And I don't think it was ever really that necessary. I think it was kind of an overrated mon on grass, but the drop does make a lot of sense. Especially since we did see grass, I think, one time in NWP. And let me see if it did use Amoonguss or not. It didn't even use Amoonguss, yeah. It used Abomasnow. Which, yeah, Abomasnow is definitely cooking. Because as someone who used Abomasnow on grass, that mon is actually really good. It fixes a couple of grass's biggest problems, which is notably its weakness to ice moves. It can actually take those. Huge. Massive even. But, yeah. I'm sure there's a very certain user that's very upset about his drop, but it is what it is. Anyway, moving on to Torterra. Torterra Rising. This is actually the one nomination that I do not know why this happened. Because Torterra's been doing the same thing forever, as far as I'm aware, and I haven't noticed any new trends on ladder, nor have I noticed anything in tournament, because we did see Torterra in MWP, but it didn't really do that much. So I'm not 100% sure where this rise is coming from. Maybe there was someone in council who really likes Torterra and showed a bunch of replays of it being good. I don't know, but this change, I don't know where it came from. I'm not against it, by the way. This is a fine nomination for Torterra. I think Torterra is actually a fine mon on grass, but this is definitely weird because I don't see any notable changes in Torterra's usage or it proving itself in the biggest stage. I don't know. It's a weird nomination, but I'm not against it, but it's a weird nomination. Next we have ground dropping Garchomp from A to B. And I do definitely think that Garchomp is definitely lacking a little bit, which is insane because typically, historically, on ground, Garchomp is a really good mon because it's got that dragon typing, it's got that good speed tier, it can set hazards, it can do Swords Dance, it can do... It was almost like a Swiss Army knife mon. This generation, however, ground has gotten some really, really good Pokemon, and Garchomp just does not work well with them. Like, for example, Clodsire is a really good Pokemon, but Garchomp typically wants to set hazards, so now that Clodsire and Ting-Lu as well can set those hazards, Garchomp just finds itself not being able to do that role, so now it's forced to be a physical attacker, but unfortunately, he's contested for being a physical attacker with one of the scariest physical attackers on ground, which is Excadrill in Sand. And not only having to contest with him, but Mamoswine and Great Tusk, as this post says, are also really big deals. And we did see a lot of Great Tusk in MWP, so Garchomp having to compete with all of those guys, as well as the other hazard setters, it's just very hard to justify using it. Its speed tier is great. Like, it's still great, even with all this stuff, all these other mons, because those two mons that we just mentioned, Mamoswine and Great Tusk, are slower than Garchomp. But the issue is that their secondary typings are just way better for dealing with the matchups that ground wants to win, like for flying, for example. Well, Great Tusk not so much for flying, but Mamoswine is helpful for flying, and Great Tusk helps a lot against some troublesome steel teams and dark teams, most notably. But yeah, Garchomp is just very hard to fit nowadays on the ground. And typically it finds itself more on sandless teams, but even on sandless teams there are better options. So yeah, it's rough for Garchomp, but this fall does make a lot of sense. Alright, next up we have Pekkarunt. We just spoke a lot about this one before, but it's basically a lot of the same thing. People are just realizing that Pekkarunt is very powerful and very annoying to deal with. So yeah. Next we have Glimmora. Glimmora, now, the Resident Poison user Pengarzan disagrees with this nomination. I don't know how to feel about it because I don't use poison that much. A few times I do use poison, I don't really use Glamora either. I typically tend to use a more standard balance team centering around Iron Moth and 3 defensive Pokemon, as well as a Sneasler. And I don't really typically fit Glamora on those teams because I just feel like it doesn't do that much for that playstyle, but that's because I like the more typical balanced playstyle. I'm sure Glamora probably facilitates a more, what should I say, proactive offensive build. But for my intents and purposes, I don't really find it to be that useful. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't really have a lot to say about this mod in particular, but I know that the Resident Poison user does not agree with this nomination, and there's no reason to really get given to it, so the only thing I can imagine is that maybe they just think Corrosion's good, or it's a roll compression with a Mortal Spin, and being able to Toxic while also having a okay defensive typing against stuff like Fire is handy, but I don't know 100% why it rose. So, although I'm not super confused about why this is rising, because we definitely did see Glamora, I think a few times on the poison teams that were brought in MWP. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, we did see Glamora. It was once and it didn't win, but it still showed up. And I believe the Glamora, I think the Glamora did do work in that match, if I recall it correctly, but yeah. It's a weird mod. Alright, next up we have Corviknight. So, Corviknight, yeah, we saw the bulk upsets in MWP. I mean, really, you can just say the bulk upsets are really strong, and that's really all we need to say. We've seen it, if you watch this channel and you see the Steel games, you know that bulk up Corviknight is just a really scary threat, and it's been so powerful in the matches that it's been brought in. So, yeah, you would bring this with Skarmory, double Flying Bird, but one of them was a threat. And they both are still good defensive Pokemon, even when running Bulk Up. Corviknight is still a good defensive Pokemon. Yeah, that's all you really need to say. Corviknight just got better because of the discovery of the Bulk Up set. Not much else you need to say about that. Next up we have Excadrill. Excadrill was definitely a new thing, because I think I said before MWP started that typically you run the same couple of Pokemon, and then you have a Swords Dancer of choice, which used to be Bisharp and Scizor. But in this tournament, we saw that that was not what was run. It was instead, saw a lot of Hisuian Goodra, and also Excadrill. We saw Excadrill, both, I think we saw both Swords Dance and Choice Scarf. And as mentioned in this post, it does help a lot against the Dragon matchup, but it's also very solid against opposing Steel as well, which is definitely something you have to think about, because Steel was brought a ton in this tournament, so planning for the mirror, definitely a somewhat decent idea. But yeah, it rising to B definitely makes a lot of sense, because it did show up and do pretty well in the tournament, or in MWP, so no disagreement there. Definitely very solid. Next we have Water. So yeah, Hisuian Samurott going from A to S, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. It just makes too much sense. We just saw so much usage of this mod. I mean, not even just on Water, on Dark as well. Hisuian Samurott, not as much usage on Dark, but definitely when me and Boop were talking, we talked about just the insane amount of usage of, where is it? That's weird. I don't know why it's not showing up on here, but yeah, it has a ridiculous amount of usage on Water. I don't know why it's not showing up here though, but yeah, it was an absurd amount, and I'm sure if you go back to the video you'll see that it had an absurd amount of usage, but yeah, that mod was omnipresent. It was on almost every single team, if not every single team. And it's just because Cecil's Edge is just so strong. Just setting hazards and also being a strong dark stab boosted by sharpness, it's just really powerful. And it also just has the priority Sucker Punch. It has Sacred Sword as well in case a Steel type comes in. It just does so much all at once. It's your hazard setter, it's a physical attacker, it's a speed control, pseudo speed control check because of Sucker Punch. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous Pokemon. It's not like super broken. It's not quite broken tier. But Ceaseless Edge is definitely an absurd move that is making that mon very obnoxious to deal with. So, yeah. This makes complete sense. And yeah, Punching Fluttermane is great. Yes. So, Greninja is also falling on water from S to A. A lot of the same reason. It's just different mons. It's literally same story, different type. That's actually quite literally what I have to say about Greninja. It's just other mons are doing way better than it, and it's falling off because it's low special tech and low utility. It's just showing now more than ever. And yeah, Scarf Shifu and Walking Wake specifically is also doing really good. And yeah, that's really all I have to say, because a lot of what I said about Greninja is just can be repeated in Dark. Just replace stuff like Darkrai being better and Hugonbound being better with Scarfer Shifu and Specs Walking Wake being better. That very much sums up my thoughts on Greninja. And for the last two we have here, we have Manaphy and Rotom Wash. So Rotom Wash, I don't even think I remember seeing it once in the tournament. Maybe it did show up, but yeah, there's actually just too many. There's too many mons on water, but yeah. Yeah, we did see Manaphy, and Manaphy did quite well, so I'm not quite sure why Manaphy is falling. They say in the update that it's because of Ogerpon W, which, I mean, yeah, I guess, because Ogerpon is a scarier setup there, but Manaphy, especially on a type like Water, a B rank mon on Water doesn't need to be that omnipresent on teams. It just needs to have a very solid niche, in my opinion anyway. And I feel like Manaphy does have that solid niche still, even with the existence of Ogerpon W, but I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken there. I can't say I'm familiar with all the styles of Water. That is something I notably need to get a little bit more versed in, because Water is a very diverse type. I should probably familiarize myself with all the different types of archetypes with Water. I'm still trying to get used to using Basculation F to this day, but yeah. I'm also surprised that Basculation F was not on this list at all. I think it rose already though, so maybe that's why. But yeah, that is it for this video. So yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about all these changes to Monotype viability rankings. But TLDR, Greninja is definitely taking a hit in its viability. And a lot of things fell, and a lot of things, like, I'd say there's definitely a lot of rises, but it seems like a lot of falls of notable Pokemon as well. So I would say a major metagame shift kind of happened. Because even though people are saying, like, the metagame is, like, roughly the same, I would say it's the same, but it's still shifting. Like, there's different trends happening now, especially with MWP recently happening. And there's a couple more discoveries that have been made. And there's still, like I've said before, there is still stuff in the lower tiers, or the lower tier types, that I don't think are being fully fleshed out. WinCon is working on that, and we did see Wafflecopter, if you saw my previous video, do really well with that TR Psychic team that is very strong. But yeah, I definitely think that there is definitely still some stuff in the metagame that needs to be looked at a little bit. Maybe a little harder look at Ghost, because I see some people thinking that Ghost is really strong secretly. Maybe we need to do a little bit of looking into Fairy as well, because obviously I'm Fairy's biggest champion, but Fairy is very underrated right now still. Even after its incredible performance in MWP, I still think that Fairy is being kind of slept on how good it is. So yeah. With that being said, that is all I have for this video. So the second purpose of this video is to announce that I am doing a new challenge. I will be trying to hit 1600 on the ladder using only low tier types. I'll have another video describing that in the future. Hopefully I'll be somewhere in either the 1400s or 1500s when I try and make that video, but yeah, I will be only using low tier types, and the types I am allowed to use will be Bug, Poison, Normal, Psychic, Grass, Ice, Electric, and Rock. And I can only use those types to get to 1600. So yeah, hopefully that challenge goes a little bit well, and I'll have some good content to share with you guys about that. Maybe I can show off a couple of teams, some new discoveries I made, that as well. But yeah, that'll be it for the video. I will see you guys next time, and have a great week.